The daily allowance is 400 international units. You know what that is? That's 1/100th of a gram. I mean, 400 is ridiculous. It takes 40,000, to make a milligram. 40,000 makes 1 milligram, 47,000. They tell you 400. So they tell you can only have 1/100th of a milligram. Could be toxic. Well, how come then your BDRs are 5,000? How come you produce 50,000 when you go out in the sun? And when you go out in the sun, something else happens to you. You produce inositol triphosphate. That regulates all your minerals. And when you go out in the sun, something else happens to you. Guess where God put your pituitary gland? Smack behind your eyes. Where did he put your pineal gland? Smack behind your eyes. Where did he put your hypothalamus gland? Smack behind your eyes. And guess what? They only work with full spectrum light. Got to take off your glasses. Bottom line is, when they work, you produce all the correct hormones, all the correct things, and your body's balanced. So if you stay out in the sun, you're going to be one sick cookie. You take a pretty flower out of the sun, it wilts. If you take a pretty woman out of the sun, she wilts just as fast for the same reasons. You can't do it. There's the Vilcabamba Indians in Ecuador, and then you look at them Okinawans, millions of them, all living long with no cancer, no heart disease. I also saw in 1982 a picture of a Canadian Eskimo on the front cover of the National Geographic. And the article was on the fact that here's an Eskimo that eats 78% blubber, and he doesn't have heart disease. He doesn't have cancer. He doesn't have diabetes. The only Eskimos that are sick are the ones we feed, and they got all our diseases. And the ones we don't feed have no diseases. Now, doesn't that sort of indicate to you that our diet is causing our sickness? Well, what we do is we go look at what they eat, and they eat every single thing you're told not to is what they eat. Now, they love omelets, and you know how they make omelets? On a cast iron skillet, and they put in about a pound of butter. When it gets good and melted, then they like to eat fat, so they put in about a pound of bacon. When it gets good and fat, they put in 12 eggs, 4 cups of goat's milk, and a pound of cheese. And it's really bland, so then they start adding handfuls of salt. Now, they eat so much salt that when they go out in the field, the Hunsons, for example, they'll drink about 20 cups of tea, but they won't have 1 cup of tea without a big scoop of butter and a big handful of salt. And you're thinking, oh, salt's bad for you. Now, in 1982, I knew they were wrong because salt raises your blood pressure. You know how I knew that? My doctor told me. How did he know that? Well, the drug industry told him to tell us this. Did you know that we quickly went to find out the scientific information on salt, and there is none? There's not one study in the world, ever, that said that salt raises your blood pressure. How about that? But when you look at these studies, you know what you find? You find studies like the Albert Einstein Institute of Medicine in New York, our #1 research facility, and last year they released a massive study they did on thousands of men and women and diet, and they concluded, #1, no amount of salt raises your blood pressure, not even 1 unit, and the second conclusion was the men and women who doubled their salt intake from a teaspoon a day to 2 teaspoons a day reduced heart disease by 400%. They even went on to explain how salt reduces your heart disease. America is suffering from salt deficiency, badly. The elderly produce only 1/5 the stomach acid that they did when they were 20. And stomach acid is produced from salt, which they won't eat. And so they don't get nutrients from other sources. It goes around in a vicious chain. Salt is great for you. But when you look at the other thing, the butter, well, I got to tell you, margarine is lethal. It's full of cis-trans fat. When they do studies with twins, the twin that takes margarine has 4 times the cholesterol count that the twins on the butter. They've got you brainwashed into thinking that margarine's healthy, and every scientist knows it's lethal. Did you know that the Harvard School of Medicine did a massive study for 7 years on 67,000 women in one group and 67,000 in a control group? They give them fat. Man-made fat, margarine, corn oil, vegetable oil. When you squeeze corn, there's no oil in it. You can make oil from the carpet, so I can put carpet oil on your salad if you'd like. But I can make it from anything. But it's man-made, and I make it different because I don't want it to go rancid. I want it to last. So man-made oil isn't the same. Well, they discovered after 7 years that the women on the man-made fat had increased breast cancer by 70%. And the control group that had animal fat, olive oil, everything was natural fat, reduced breast cancer, reduced it by 50%. Almost a 5-fold difference in breast cancer, depending upon which fat you eat. So, this theory that fat's bad for you is just that. It's just a theory. There's just no proof about the fat, okay? It's not true. I can show you scientific studies that'll tell you if you double up on your fat content, take a tablespoon a day, you reduce breast cancer by 100%, you reduce your chance of heart disease and stroke by 200% if you double up on your fat. So, eat your butter, eat your animal fats, but don't eat your milk because you know milk's bad for you. You know why? Because you're not eating it. By the time the average American gets 35, they stop drinking milk, they stop having any calcium, okay? What I ask you people to do is don't be prejudiced against milk. Just look at what the scientists have discovered and found out. And there's massive studies done. In the book, The Calcium Factor, we talk about a study done by the Royal Research Medical Council in Britain. Now, they're the most prestigious medical council in the world. Doctors, scientists. I mean, you can't find more pedigreed people in the world. And they did a massive study on men and women from the age of 45 to 55, heart disease versus diet. After 10 years, with thousands and thousands of people and the best hundreds of scientists, they concluded, and the conclusion was, the more milk you drink, the less heart disease you have. If you have a quart of milk a day, you reduce heart disease by 1,000%. So in other words, our number one killer in America, we can wipe out with a drug called milk. Now, it doesn't end there. There's more, there's more. Did you know that they did the study on women's breast cancer? And it was the National Institute of Health in Finland? And this is a prestigious study, okay? This study was done and concluded in January of this year, okay? And after they did the study, newspapers reported it. You had front page titles like this one, A Glass of Prevention. Let me read to you what the study concluded after doing tens of thousands of women and breast cancer. The report concludes there is an overwhelming association between the high consumption of milk and the prevention of breast cancer compared to any other factor there is. They found that if a woman would take a quart of milk a day, she would reduce breast cancer 1,000%. They said it didn't matter if it was 2% skimmed or whole, just like the British study. It didn't matter if it was 2% skimmed or whole. It's the calcium factor. They said, therefore, the more calcium you consume, the less breast cancer you get. This study said the more calcium you consume, the less heart disease you get. And the more calcium you consume, the less diabetes, the less lupus, the less multiple sclerosis. They're all related to acidosis driving oxygen out of the body. Dr. Otto Warburg was absolutely correct. So we look at all these people, it didn't matter what they're eating. So the things you've been told, the things you have been told are not true. Almost everything they tell you. Now, who's telling you this? The drug industry. It is not the doctors speaking. They only reiterate what they're told to tell you. The doctors are not fools. They're actually on our side. They would prescribe vitamins and nutrients, but if they do, they lose their license. So you can't blame the doctors. You can blame the AMA, whose 87% of their board members become board members of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and 92% of those board members end up with multi-million-dollar pensions from the drug industry. They control each other. They are each other. They are one and the same. Bottom line is, you haven't got a chance. Don't